Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktavrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shiva Shadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much for coming. As I mentioned, we'll be a little short tonight, not a little, we'll stop at 7:30 in order to allow time for Tuako's program, which starts early just today. Krishna Nandini will be speaking today, and this fits her schedule. In the last meeting, we discussed some of the difficulties of the Vanaprastha ashram, particularly everything came down really to one word: security. How will I live? How will I how will I be able to support myself, or what happens in case of health issues? Many different questions about security. I'm not going to address those today. We talked about them a little bit, and we can circle back and talk about them again. But especially given that this is a shorter session, I'm going to revisit those topics later, and maybe visit them several times. Today I said that we talked about some no-risk things that one could do. Let me begin by saying that in the Vanaprastha ashram, the main thing is a change of consciousness. That's not to say that there's nothing external that changes. There is, and there's a lot. But the underlying force is a change of consciousness. That's what actually makes one a Vanaprastha. That's what actually propels one along in the Vanaprastha ashram, is this change of consciousness. It, of course, it's a continuation or either an extension of or related to our desire to advance in Krishna consciousness. On that Krishna conscious path, part of what we want to do is cultivate detachment from this material world. And well, all of what we want to do is cultivate detachment from this material world and attachment to Krishna. So in the Vanaprastha ashram, of course, detachment is a major theme, because in the Grahastha ashram, attachment is developed. A relationship, especially between husband and wife, then with children, with one's possessions, with so many things relating to one's household affairs. A natural attachment is expected, or it does develop. So in the Vanaprastha ashram, we're looking to reduce that attachment. And we can look at it this way. As we begin the Grahastha ashram, we're building up. A young man and young woman get married and build up a career, build a nest, they get a home and various possessions, and the children, and so many things develop. So we're building up, just as during youth, we're growing. Young man is growing in strength, he's increasing in capability and in his net worth. So in the Vanaprastha ashram, just the opposite, we're winding down, reducing our necessities, reducing our attachments, getting free from the engagements that we took up in terms of material life. In the Grahastha ashram, one is looking for a good career, promotion, advancement in one's profession. In the Vanaprastha ashram, one is looking to pull back from those things. So it's a process of winding up or winding down in preparation for leaving this world, or in preparation first for leaving family life altogether, and finally and inevitably leaving this material world. So that's the overall theme. That's the overall theme, detachment. And as we know, the sages or the kings and people of previous ages used to achieve that by going to the forest and very dramatically detaching themselves, living a life of severe austerity. And we're not going to do that because it's not possible or advisable. But there are things that we can do. Some of them, as we discussed last time, do involve a sort of risk, that is saying that I'm going to depend now more on Krishna and less on material security. That requires conviction, it requires courage, it requires confidence that I can do this. But there are things that I can do that don't even involve a risk, and perhaps even reduce the risks that we have. We talked about, of course, the headline item in a previous meeting, which is that in the Vanaprastha ashram, there's no sex, because sex is the anchor of material life. So in the Grihastha ashram, there's scope for regulated sex life, but in the Vanaprastha ashram, no sex. Brahmacharya ashram, Vanaprastha ashram, sannyasa ashram, no sex. That's the first thing, and that's essential. There's no Vanaprastha life along with sex life. Now, what are some of the other things that one can do? Well, there are quite a number of things. One is that one can simplify one's eating. We read about this in the Bhagavatam, that kings like Prithu Maharaj and the others would go to the forest. They would live on roots and berries and leaves and so on. And again, that's an example that we can't follow. But we can simplify our eating. The Grihasthas, we read sometimes that Prabhupada has written that the rich eating and so on is for the Grihasthas, not for the Brahmacharis. It's also not for the Vanaprasthas. If the Vanaprasthas can simplify their eating, that will be good for them on several accounts. One is that, remember, the Vanaprastha ashram is accepted around the age of 50. At that age, to reduce eating is generally good. If you're overweight, then it's definitely good. And we know that in America, many people, a disproportionate number of people, including devotees, are overweight. And that's not only a health risk, but Hare Krishna. There's a way to make it sure that people are muted upon entering. I don't have this, power at the moment to know where things are. This is a strange conference because I can't manipulate it before I get in. Anyway, that's another thing. So the other thing is that reduced eating means that the senses become more easy to control. When the senses are powerfully fed or fed with stimulating food, they become influenced more by passionate life. They become less easy to control. Of all the senses, the tongue is difficult to control and essential to control. If the tongue is not controlled, then controlling the other senses becomes more difficult. Therefore, we control, and this tongue has two functions, tasting and vibrating. So for the tasting function, we know for the vibrating function, chant Hare Krishna, and for the tasting function, the food can be simplified. If we are accustomed to sometimes eating food not offered to Krishna, that we should now change. Sometimes in Grihastha life, we're working so many things and we eat anything vegetarian. But this what we can do, that just Krishna Prasadam, that simple vow will help us. And then also, if we can eat, first of all, at scheduled times, not sort of the American snack as you go along style, but eat in a regulated way, that will help us. And eat simply. That means that the rich foods, the gulab jamuns, the sweet rice, they're described in Bhagavad Gita. What is that? All ati. I'm not going to look it up because it'll take too much time. But lavanatyushna tikshna ruruksha vidahinaha, food that's real hot, real sweet, real sour, real salty. Those kinds of foods are impassioned. They stimulate the tongue. Well, that's what we want to stop doing. We want to reduce the stimulation and eat in the mode of goodness, which means food that's nourishing, food that's healthy, food that gives satisfaction. You take it and you say, yes, that's nice. I've had my fill. So that kind of eating makes the senses peaceful. It helps us bring the senses to a peaceful condition. So that's a simple thing that the grahastas can do. Simplify their eating. And I won't tell you what that means, what to eat, what not to eat. That's up to you. You may want to be very, quite strict or quite radically simple, or you might want to just cut in a more modest way. But that's something that we can do. And it can be progressive also. More simple, more simple, more simple. That will make us more healthy. That will make us more peaceful. That will help us bring the senses under control. And there's no risk in this, unless you're terribly, some people perhaps doctor's orders, you don't want to eat less, you're already undernourished, but that's probably not the general case. Even then, you don't have to eat opulently. But generally the problem is the opposite, that we're accustomed to eating more. Over these 25 or so years of householder life, we've become perhaps paunchy or oversized. So eating can be simplified. Eating can be simplified. Then, of course, speaking. That's the other function of the tongue. So we can accustom ourselves to speaking more about Krishna and cut on Brahmya Katha. Cut the needless talk by increasing the chanting of Hare Krishna and speaking about Krishna. When Prabhupada was in Fiji, one of the devotees there was, and two of the devotees were an elderly couple, and the gentleman asked Srila Prabhupada what he should do. And Prabhupada answered in 2 words, more japa. Chant japa more. He was, of course, from Indian, Fijian background, so perhaps it was already there in the culture. But a devotee who's been chanting for so many years, it's in his culture. More japa, that's one thing you can do. Doesn't require tremendous rushing here and there. Sit down and chant Hare Krishna. That's not a useless engagement, especially in one's older years, just to chant Hare Krishna. More japa, increase your number of rounds. That's something you can do. Not that you may do, that may not be what you do. Maybe you do something else by which you engage your full time in Krishna's service. But the idea is to engage the tongue in Krishna consciousness. To his wife, by the way, to the gentleman's wife, Srila Prabhupada gave the instruction to be always engaged in the service of the deity. So that's another theme. The idea is that at this stage of life, we should be engaged in these direct methods of serving Krishna, hearing, chanting, worshiping the deity. These direct devotional practices are the essence of life, especially for the retired people. So that's practical. I've mentioned a couple. Then another simple thing, and I've got a long list here that we're not going to cover. I think I've mentioned this before. Cut the television. The television is not a devotional necessity. It's not a spiritual necessity. If you're one of these really controlled people that only watches on the television devotional, or ISKCON devotional films and so on, fine. Cut your cable connection. You have the machine and you watch something Krishna conscious, but you don't need cable TV. And especially we see this is sort of a default mode for many people in retired life. They spend so much time watching the television, the news, the Star TV, this, that, and really waste their life. So this is something that you can do that will, first of all, keep Maya from infiltrating or from having an open invitation into your home. And it will save you so much time, which you can now invest in chanting Hare Krishna, in serving Krishna. So television, either get rid of the darn thing entirely or cut your cable connection and be very strict about using it just for strictly devotional viewing. And for some people, that won't make much difference. So anyway, you're already doing that. For others, you may find that this is a large and easy gain. There's no risk. No one ever died from not watching television. And here's a simple, easy sacrifice. And it may save you money also. If you're a cable subscriber, you just got some extra capital. So that too. I've spoken for 20 minutes. Why don't I stop here and see if there's some questions or comments that you'd like to bring forward.
Maharaj, but before I go to other questions, I was just hearing you speak about getting rid of the television. And of course, nowadays, I think it's more prevalent that everyone is surfing the internet to get their video stimulus. And that's probably another whole topic of how to gradually reduce your internet connections.
That's like a month-long seminar, but I can say one thing that I do, which I find very helpful. Till 9 o'clock, the gadgets are off. Till 9 a.m., the gadgets are off. That's time for sadhana. That's time for spiritual engagement. So absent some, urgent necessity, something that really needs me to be available, which is not very common. Just till 9 o'clock, let it be off. And then you won't be doing this chanting with one hand and texting with the other, or chanting with one hand and watching to see what's coming in, or hearing those alarms and then thinking, yes, I better respond. It's just off. That alone, and that again is not a big sacrifice. The world can wait. Nothing terribly urgent is going to happen. So before 9 o'clock, or whatever hour you want to push it to, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, till that time, just keep your gadgets off. The phone, the tablet, the laptop, just keep them off. And those are your most valuable hours, those early hours of the day, which are now focused. You don't have a television, you don't have internet, you have Bhagavatam, you have beads, you have Bhagavatam, you have the deities. That in itself it can be uplifting.
Yes.
Is that all right?
Tulsi Priya had something.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much for the talk. On the subject of eating, if you don't mind, I would just like to share a little bit of realization I had about it. I'm overweight, but that's more from sedentariness than overeating, although I probably do overeat a bit. But when I first joined, I was not that young. I was not yet 30, and I could eat maybe 3 plates of prasadam and not bat an eye and still have energy to do what I needed to do. And then as I got older, I started to realize that when I would eat a lot, like especially at a feast, Sunday feast or a feast day, a festival day, that I would overeat, and then I would suffer so greatly afterwards from overeating that it would kind of ruin the experience of having enjoyed a nice feast. So then I started just eating a little bit, you know, like one plate, and then I would have the enjoyable experience of having nice Krishna Prasad without the suffering afterwards from indigestion. And as I aged more and more, and then when I went to India, I got sick. And I remembered your words and other people's words about not overeating when you're sick. And I developed a system for not eating too much, and it kept me from getting sicker. And I feel like as you age, your energy, the more energy of your body gets put into digestion, the less there is for maintaining and repairing the other bodily functions that go on. So it seems to me that people need to pay attention to the cues of their body and reduce their eating gradually, because it's going to end up in disease, result in disease down the line if you're wasting your energy on digesting too much food rather than allowing that energy to maintain and heal the body. I hope that makes sense.
It does. Prabhupada said, like a child should eat more. There's two things, overeating and undereating. Said for a child, it's all right to overeat, but it's better for the older people to undereat. And one theme of the Vanaprastha ashram is that a lot of the things we're talking about are the things that our bodies are asking us to do anyway. Mm-hmm. The things that are consistent with the direction our body is going. So less eating, less passionate activity. This is all consistent with biology. And people are trying to defy biology so that they can enjoy into their old age. But if they'll be more in tune with just nature, forget spirituality, then they would be following these recommendations anyway. And what to speak of having a spiritual aim.
Sorry, I think people get into habits, you know, based on culture or just whatever's convenient during a certain phase of life. And we have to not be attached to our habits. You know, like I used to eat pickles and very spiced foods with lots of chilies, and now I can't. I started getting indigestion from those things, so I don't eat them anymore. But if you have that habit, I think a lot of people will tolerate the suffering because they're just used to it and they like it. So you really have to pay attention to what your body's telling you.
And from a practical point of view, that may also have to do with what you stock in your house, because we do what's convenient. So if your program is that you want to change your eating, then change what you stock also. Not that, anyway, so many things are said about how to control eating, but we won't get into the details. There's 100 seminars about that. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a little bit of time left, just a couple of minutes. Would someone else like to say something or ask something or contribute something?
Good question.
Mm-hmm.
How long is this seminar going to last for?
Well, my joke was it's till everyone takes sannyas. But it's open-ended. When we've covered as much as we want to cover and there's nothing more that we really need to say, then we might as well stop. But I'm not going to fit it into 5 lessons or 7 lessons. Well, maybe that's lazy of me, but that's my thought. Yes, Kamalini.
I would say if it ever ends, then we can have a new seminar called The Dying Adventure.
Mm.
You know, like actually it's going to be quite an adventure. So, you know, to kind of embrace it and, you know, and kind of plan for the future, next life or whatever.
Yeah.
And make it an adventure rather than such a fearful kind of dreaded event.
Yes.
So I'd like to see that seminar after.
Yeah, it's a good. Of course, Vanaprastha ashram is also part of that adventure too, because we see death coming, and so we're basically saying, all right, let's. We know we're going to have a rendezvous down the line. So we want to be ready for I have a mantra that death is acceptable. You know, the world is running away from death. And of course, that's natural, but death is acceptable. At a certain point, death will come. And the main thing is to be spiritually prepared, to be Krishna conscious, so that at the time of death, Ante Narayana Smriti, we can remember Krishna. Thank you, Kamalini. Very practical.
Thank you.
Valuable, sensible suggestion. We're at 7:30. As I mentioned, Krishna Nandini, who's facing death right now, she's in hospice care in Vrindavan, will be speaking on the Tuaco channel.
She's back home now here in North Carolina.
Oh, that's right. She's back in North Carolina.
The treatment was excruciatingly painful in Vrindavan. Yeah, her children all bought her a house, and some of them are living with her to help take care of her.
So she'll be speaking on the Tuaco channel. So we'll close down this meeting so that we're not overlapping. And then next week again, we'll continue and we'll have, Krishna willing, the full hour. Thank you all very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Maharaj.
Thank you. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Jaya.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jaya.
Jai. Haribol.
Haribol.
Haribol. Jai.
Thanks, Maharaj. Right.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Hi, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Oh, Tukahan.
Good evening.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Here, look, gallery.